Hello, I'm Callie Fell with the Center for Bioethics and Culture Network. Today, I have the pleasure of sitting down with Gloria. She reached out to the Center for Bioethics and Culture, wanting to share her story, share her journey, that she calls it, with her surrogacy pregnancy. And so we're going to talk to her today. So, Gloria, thank you so much for coming to us and emailing us and agreeing to sit down and allow me to interview you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to spread some awareness.
Yeah. So tell me, before we get started, easy questions. Tell me a little bit about you and your family. You have children, I assume. Tell me a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I'm 33. I live in Southern California. I have two boys. One of them is special needs. He's on the spectrum, and my husband is active duty military officer. So I'm kind of just a stay-at-home mama, making sure everything stays together.
An underappreciated role, stay-at-home mom, and I bet you are so busy with two boys. I have one girl, and I feel like I'm so busy. So thanks for taking time out of your day and out of your family's day to talk to me. How many times have you been a surrogate mother?
I have been a gestational surrogate twice now.
Twice. Okay. And how much time was there between the two surrogate pregnancies?
It was I gave birth to the first one February of 2020, and I began the second journey July of 2022.
Okay. So pretty quickly, pretty close together.
I'm sorry, 2021. Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty okay. So even closer than originally.
Yeah.
Really close. Is that what you wanted, or were you
Not originally, I'm not gonna lie. The agency does start calling pretty quickly after you deliver, trying to kind of pressure you into completing a second journey.
I see. And the two separate surrogate pregnancies were with two completely different couples. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
My
Okay.
first one were international from Spain, and the second one was here locally in California.
Okay. Okay. And your first, I know a little bit of background from our emailing back and forth, but your first pregnancy, your first surrogacy, went pretty well as planned, no real complaints there. And that's kind of what intrigued you to keep doing with another pregnancy. Is that correct?
Yes. After I delivered the first surrogate baby, we became really close with the intended parents. We stay in touch to this day. I'm still very close with them. I thought it was amazing to be a part of a team to help complete a family. So I really went into this thinking that I would get the exact same experience.
Mhm. Okay, so we're gonna get into why they were different and what happened the second time in a little bit, but let's walk through kind of and we'll specifically talk about the second one. We'll use that as our example or as what we're talking about. But let's talk through kind of the process. So the agency that you had used the first time reached out pretty quickly after delivery, wanting you to start the process over. So when they reached out and you agreed, what happens next? I assume there's, you'll match with someone, and then I know that there's a contract involved. So maybe walk us through that and your process the second time with them.
Right. So this agency is a little different because the surrogates actually don't get to view the IP profiles. Only they get to view our profiles. So once they found someone they thought I would be a great match with, they set up a match meeting, and you kind of get some questions out of the way. You kind of interview each other and see if your personalities would match. During that meeting, I was very specific about my needs. They agreed to all those needs. And so I felt like, you know what, this is a good match. Let's go for it. After that, you get sent to their fertility clinic for medical clearance. Once medical clearance goes through, um, you go into contracts. So they provide a lawyer for me. They have their separate lawyer, and you kind of go back and forth on the contract, although there isn't that much you can change. Um, and so once everything is agreed on, they then buy an insurance policy for you to
Like a health
cover the,
insurance
yes,
or okay.
health insurance policy to cover the pregnancy if you do not have surrogacy friendly insurance, which I do not. Therefore, they had to buy an extended policy.
Sure. And when you say that they provided you a lawyer, who is they? Is that the intended parents or
Yes, the intended parents. The agency gives you a list of people you can pick from, and then you pick one, and it's paid for by the intended parents.
so you get to pick from the list?
Yes.
Okay. 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 And was there any specific reason why you picked who you picked? Just out of curiosity.
I had already worked with her on my
Okay.
first journey, so I just was like, let's make it easy. We already know each other.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And then when you talk about the contract, what do you mean that there isn't much that can be changed? You had said that they agreed with a lot of your like stipulations in the initial meetings. Were you able to put those stipulations in the contract or
I was not.
okay.
It was kind of their word on it.
Ah.
Yeah.
Can you
And
give us
so
Oh, I'm so sorry. You go
no,
ahead.
no, no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, can you give us some examples of some of the things that you really wanted to stipulate that that were really important to you?
So one of the huge ones that I went over in the match meeting was my inability to travel. As I said initially, I am a special needs mom. I need to be in my city at all times because if the school calls me and my child needs me, I need to be able to be there at the drop of a dime.
Yeah. Especially with your
However,
husband being in the military, probably not always around and
yeah, he's
available.
gone all the time, all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Can I ask again, or not again, but can I back up just for a second? And if you don't feel comfortable sharing, that's okay. But can I ask your motivation for wanting to be a surrogate mother? And I ask because this is one of the questions that Jennifer and I asked in our interviews when we did research on surrogate mothers to kind of understand. And it's hard to quantify because there are multiple reasons, but
Right.
do you have any specific reason or drive? Did you know someone that was a surrogate mother that you connected with? Like, tell me a little bit more about your reasoning behind.
To be quite frank, once I started researching just to see if this would be a possibility, you get kind of this sold this dream of you're being helped while helping someone complete their family.
Hmm.
They tell you that it's non-taxed, and as a stay-at-home mom, it was kind of like, how perfect. I get to complete this job while also being available to my family 24/7 for the most part.
Yeah,
So
and
that's been a
providing for
huge
them.
factor. Exactly.
Yeah,
My husband makes great money, so it wasn't necessarily the need for money, but it was just like, if I can help build our savings, why not?
sure, sure. And I mean, we've used some of the language. I hate it. I even in the intro used it because you use it a lot, and I want people to see that. But even some of the language they use, the agency or the big fertility, what we call big fertility, like journey, and it's very flowery. It's very, yeah, it kind of gets you right. Like that's
Yeah, I mean, they tell you how, you're going to be the most important person in these people's lives. And I'm not going to lie, it's a great feeling.
who wouldn't want to be
To
the most important person in someone's life, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and then, to know that you're part of this huge team that gave, a well-deserving couple a child. I mean, yeah, it's definitely a great feeling. Now we know that it's not always the case, but
Sure. Right. Yeah, we're gonna get in that. So we've talked about, giving a well-meaning couple, the baby of their dreams. So let's talk about that well-meaning couple in this particular scenario, being kind of generic, but Tell me about them. Did you bond well? You already, I think, alluded to that they're from the United States here. Do you have a relationship with them now? How have they been treating you?
I did not bond with them whatsoever. Past contracts. Everything was great in the beginning, of course. Once contracts were completed, they very quickly changed their personality. And as much as I wanted to back out, the agency then starts to pressure you into not backing out because they do want that match meeting. This agency gets a $30,000 fee just for setting you up with these intended parents. Um, when things started going south, like I said, I had called the caseworker multiple times saying, I just don't think I can go through with this. And I was constantly threatened with breach of contract. And you're gonna have to pay this back. You're gonna have to pay, the lawyer fees, the health insurance policy, and the medical clearance back. So I mean, I felt like I had no choice but to continue. That only got worse as the pregnancy progressed. And today we are not on good terms at all.
And I just think about women who do this because they need the financial support. They can't breach contract. They can't pay this back. That's really kind of out of the question. You mentioned a caseworker. So can you let our listeners know what is a caseworker for the agency? Who is this person to you? Go in a little more detail there.
Right. So once you get set up with intended parents, the agency hands you a caseworker, which is supposed to be your support person. They see you through the entire journey. They're there to clear up any issues with the intended parents. They're supposed to help you with hospital records. They're supposed to help you with appointments, all those kind of things.
Yeah. So they're your go-to, your personal kind of go-to person.
They're
Gotcha.
supposed to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And are they medically trained? Do they give you any like medical education on the process?
Absolutely not. Most of them are just previous surrogates that have gone through that agency.
Okay. Okay. So they kind of like recruit surrogates to then coach another surrogate mother through the process.
Yeah. Now that you say that, it sounds very much like a pyramid scheme. But yeah.
I don't mean it to sound that way, but it is a little like, and we're kind of getting off topic here, but I've heard from others who have similar experiences that didn't go as planned. And whenever they start posting maybe on their Facebook group that they might have with other surrogate mothers that their experience went sideways, they get kind of like X'd out of the group or removed from the group. And so it seems like, yeah, that kind of alongside of that like pyramid scheme, like you can only say positive things about your experience, but I don't know if that's
That's very true. When I started speaking out, I was very much attacked. I was blamed for everything. And you get told you're making surrogacy look bad. And it was the same with the agency. For my first journey, they were posting me all over their social media. The minute that the second journey started going sour, I was nowhere to be found. They have surrogate support meetings on a monthly basis. I wasn't even allowed to talk about my journey during those meetings.
And as someone who's having a bad experience or a tough experience, you need a support group. That's what support groups are for, not for happy-go-lucky times. Support groups are supposed to be helpful for when things are not going well, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Okay. So transfer. You've gone through contracts, you've signed a contract, you've got lots of things that aren't in the contract that are more just trusting word of mouth. Do you know was the embryo that was transferred the genetic material of the IPs, or was it donor egg, donor sperm? Do you know?
The egg was donor,
Okay,
and then it was genetic material of the intended father.
I see. I see. And how did transfer go? What was that process like? And the day of transfer, etc.
Yeah, it's always nerve-wracking, and it was more nerve-wracking because I hadn't been told that this couple only had 2 embryos created. The contract was written as if they had 6 ready to go. So it out of those 2 embryos, the intended mother told me, "We're only willing to use 1."
Mm.
So it put me in this, like, really stressful situation because if it doesn't go through, now what? I'm in limbo because I'm stuck in a contract with people who now need to create more embryos, and that can take up to a year.
Mm.
But we went forward because, again, I felt like I had to. And this was the embryo transfer day was the first time meeting the intended father in person.
So he didn't come to any of the meetings prior.
No, just the match meeting, which he was very quiet.
Hmm.
Um, and so we did the embryo transfer. He was in the room. He couldn't see anything, but he was in the room. So I did feel a bit uncomfortable because I had never met this man before. Um, and everything went well. We were on the way out. His wife had to use the restroom, and then he started talking to me, and he said, "Did it hurt?" And I was like, "The transfer?" I was like, "No, you get some sort of discomfort, some cramps, but it doesn't hurt." And he said, "Well, I had to got have something inserted up my penis, and that really hurt." And I was mortified. I felt so violated, so uncomfortable. And that is really the moment I truly realized that I should have gone with my gut. Like, this journey is only going to get worse.
Hmm. So when you say it's really inappropriate, especially because his wife is about all of it was inappropriate. When you say that so is match day the same day as embryo transfer day?
No.
Okay.
Match day usually happens like 3 months before embryo transfer day.
Okay. And you did or didn't meet him there?
I met him at the match, not in person. It was a
Oh,
Zoom meeting, but he was
oh,
very
gotcha, gotcha.
quiet. He
Gotcha,
didn't
gotcha.
talk.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. I was just confused by that. But yeah, so first time meeting this person in person, you have in a procedure that's, sensitive. And then he has a really inappropriate comment after. Okay. So now your kind of alarm bells are a little bit ringing if they weren't already, which they were. Um, so let's talk about that moment from then on. Tell me about your pregnancy. Did you get pregnant? How was the pregnancy and your experience from there?
So I think it's very important to note that after that comment, I immediately came home and I called the caseworker, aka my support person, and she laughed it off. She said,
Laughed it off?
yeah,
Hmm.
she said, "He's just being silly, ignore it."
Hmm.
Um, and so I did get pregnant. And immediately I got extremely sick. I became actually allergic to the pio shots, which, the estrogen that you have to inject so that your body thinks it's pregnant and doesn't try to fight this foreign pregnancy. Um, and I was begging for them to change the medication, and it went weeks where I've had to take this shot nightly, knowing that my body was going to react in such a negative way. Then I was actually diagnosed with hyperemesis gravidarum, which, for those that don't know, it is extreme morning sickness. You're throwing up all day long. You lose 5% of your body weight. almost immediately. You can't drink water, you can't eat anything. And it was horrible. Um, and I didn't get help for that either. Um, so it just kind of set forward this motion of me having a mental breakdown. And I think it's important to note that I was also told that the dad was not happy that they had a boy embryo. The embryos were genetically tested and they only had boy embryos. So when I became extremely sick, and I'm talking, I can't drive, I can't get out of bed, I can't even shower on my own. I had this thought of maybe this is their way out. If I lose this child, they get to start over again and hopefully get female embryos because ultimately that's what the dad wanted.
Hmm. So when you say that you didn't get help, are you not able, talk us through like how medical care works then? Because you're now using a policy that was provided to you that's not your own. So do you have a team of medical doctors or physicians that you can go to for these types of things? Or um like what did the intended parents not want to pay for you to go get treatment for your hyperemesis? Um,
So because of the policy that they bought me, am I allowed to name that policy? Am I allowed to name
let's not. We'll just
it?
say
Okay.
policy X.
So policy X, the way it works is everything is in-house. You get assigned an OB. And so let's say I wanted a second medical opinion. I just had to go to a different one of their OBs, and those OBs never um, overstep each other. They're very much, cohesive. They don't want to upset
They
anyone.
work as a group.
Exactly.
Mm.
So they were not willing to give me home health. They were not willing to let me go to a medical spa to get IVs, which was really the only way I was getting nutrients at this point. And I kept begging for a different insurance policy, and the IPs just kept saying no.
Mm.
They said, if you need it, go to urgent care.
Mm.
Mind you, my husband is gone. I have 2 children. I can't even drive myself. How am I possibly going to get myself to a hospital that was nowhere near me? So again, we're completely dismissing my needs that I was very clear about
One
in
of
the
those needs
beginning.
being that you needed to be close to home.
Yes. And then spending 5, 6 hours there for one bag of IVs.
Right.
Yeah.
So, for anyone who has not shown up at a triage or an urgent care, these are not quick facilities. You can, Gloria, I'm in healthcare. Gloria is not exaggerating that you can go to an urgent care and spend several hours waiting for care. And unfortunately, it's just the way the system is. It's not to speak down on those. It's just that there's a triage, there's a way things have to happen. But yeah, it can really eat up your time to go sit in and not have just like an established routine and established care. So I just want to kind of drive that point home there. Um do you think, this is also another kind of interesting question that I have, overall, do you think that the medical care you received from your providers, be it nurses, physicians, etc., do you think you were treated differently because you were a surrogate, or do you think that you were treated the same as you would have been?
Absolutely, I was treated differently. The agency has a lot of rules. Everything that I do has to come with a written note from the OB, or I'm in breach of contract.
Okay.
Um, and the way this OB was looking at it, I remember she said, "Who does your agency think they are? They don't get to create more work for me. You're a grown woman. You're a mother. You've been pregnant before. If you feel like you need to go do something, then do it. As long as it follows the pregnancy guidelines, you should be allowed to do it." But unfortunately, That's just not how the contracts are written. And if I do anything on my own, I am in complete breach of contract.
Right. You don't have the autonomy that a normal patient would have in their own medical setting.
Exactly.
You basically sign that away.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not to mention all of these office meetings, medical visits, the intended parents gets access to those, right? There's no HIPAA protecting you or
The only
how does that?
protection I had was the intended mother actually requested my patient portal and was told no by the OB. However, the agency had my password. They could access it at any time. I do not know that they did not hand that information to the intended mother.
Hmm. And then just the fact that an agency had your patient portal information too, right? Like,
Yes.
I don't know. Again, as someone in healthcare, I really value autonomy and privacy, that sort of thing. And I don't know that surrogate mothers who are looking into this and researching it, it's not adequately disclosed that you kind of lose all of that.
Exactly.
On that note, again, backtracking, now that you've done this twice, do you feel that the physicians you talk to from the agency and anyone else you talk to from the agency adequately informed you of what might or could happen during a surrogate pregnancy?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. They go over one of the things that they do go over is the risk of losing your life, the risk of possibly losing your reproductive organs. And there's a set price list for any reproductive organ that you lose. Um, and I think it's crazy because how do you really put a price on your fallopian tubes, your ovary? How do you put a price on a full hysterectomy? The intended parents are required in the state of California to pull out an insurance policy, a life insurance policy for you in case of death. However, what they don't tell you is the intended parents can add themselves to that policy. So your family will not get the full um, amount of money that that policy is worth sometimes.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm glad I asked that question. So hyperemesis, you're having trouble with that. Any other pregnancy complications in the first couple trimesters?
Not in the first couple trimesters, no. Again, I was only seen 5 times throughout the entire pregnancy by my actual OB. The rest of my visits were urgent care visits.
Wow. And by
Which is
your OB, that's the OB that was in the car. Like it's not, yeah.
yeah, not
Sure.
my regular OB.
Right, right. Well, I feel like I cut you off. Was there something you wanted to say there, Gloria? Sorry.
No, no.
Okay. Okay. So you hit you've gotten to the third trimester. Tell us how your pregnancy ends.
Uh, so I began preterm labor at 28 weeks. I had to get the steroid shot to help the baby's lungs develop because at that point it was a ticking time bomb. My body had just gone without nutrients for so long that we just couldn't sustain the pregnancy anymore in a healthy way, basically. We made it to 32 weeks, and all of a sudden I wake up and I'm just covered in blood. I get rushed to the hospital of my contract. So this hospital was written into the contract of where I'm supposed to deliver. But they go, "You're not our patient. We haven't seen you this entire pregnancy. We have no idea what your history is. We don't know what you're dealing with. We have to send you to your hospital an hour away." So here I am bleeding out, being whisked an hour away from my kids. I get to this hospital. I'm not allowed to see my kids. I'm not even allowed to see my husband because of COVID guidelines. So I am in a room by myself being told, we don't really know what's going on. We don't know why you're bleeding. You're going to be here indefinitely.
So before we go on, I want to understand this hospital situation. So why were you not getting care before from the hospital listed in your contract? Why are there two different ones? Can you clear that up?
So the hospital that I wanted to deliver at was technically in network as an emergency hospital. I was not told that. Um, and so when it came time to dealing with issues, all they could do was kind of put a band-aid on it till I made it to the hospital of the actual policy.
Okay.
So at this hospital, they have no plan. I'm not being fed. I'm not getting told anything. Except for we think that maybe you're having a placental abruption. Um, and you're gonna have to stay here until it's healthy for the baby to come out. And I go, well, when is that? And they go, 37 weeks is when we can let you have this baby. And I go, I'm 32 weeks right now. You want me to stay away from my kids? My husband has work. I can't stay here for 5 weeks. Um, so then I had to get my lawyer involved, and it because it was now a life or death situation, she said you have a right to sign yourself out and go to any hospital that's willing to treat you and put you first. So then I did just that, signed myself out, and made it back to the hospital that was in contract. I explained to them the situation, saying, "Look, I'm a surrogate. This policy that I have hasn't helped me the entire time. I have hyperemesis. I can't keep holding on to this baby. I'm gonna die." So then they said, "We've done everything we can. We've given you the shots. We've tried to stop your labor multiple times. It's not stopping. We're just gonna let you have this baby." Um, And so they stopped my medicine on a Sunday, and by Monday at 4 a.m., I was in full blown labor.
Hmm.
And this was at 36 weeks.
Okay.
So no, I'm sorry, 34 weeks. 34 weeks
So
was
2 weeks after you signed yourself out of the first
the,
hospital there.
yeah, yeah. And I'm bleeding the whole time. It's not like the bleeding ever stopped.
Hmm.
Um, and so another issue came up. I actually had what's called a below bed placenta, which
Mhm.
is where the placenta kind of folds in half. Something that my caring OB never caught. And so now the fear is not only is it going to rupture, but if it does rupture, then the baby could get sucked back in and both of us could die within seconds. Um, so I was actually in the room right across from the OR the entire time. I had the maternal fetal medicine team there. I had 5 OBs for me, and the baby had 3 NICU nurses for him ready to go at any time. What happened was they were going to let me try to deliver vaginally, and then if need be, wheel me to the OR for an emergency C-section. The baby's heartbeat started to drop, and I actually was forced to go into labor at 9 centimeters,
You mean
which,
the push or?
yeah, which was the most painful thing I've ever done.
Hmm. And did you deliver vaginally?
I did. I did.
And how did baby do? What do you know?
I don't really know.
Okay.
I didn't even want to see him, to be quite honest with you. I had just attached the parents to him, and I wanted nothing to do with it.
Mm.
And this entire time, I am supposed to be updating the parents on what's going on, even though I am focused on not dying because my kids need me. I have to be the one texting them. And I remember reaching out to the caseworker and I was like, what do you do? You know, where are you at? Like, this isn't, I'm trying not to die. And now it's my job to make sure that they're updated.
Right.
It was
It's
just mind blowing.
Yeah, it seems like if you're in this situation of like preterm labor, bleeding, there's a lot going on around you. Also, if your kids and family aren't with you, it's you're thinking about them, where they are, who's taking care of them, what needs they have, because that never stops as a mom. Even though you might be bleeding, you might be like that never stops. Um, and yet there's no one there to help you to say, you know what, I'll take care of the intended parents. I'll let them know what's going on. You take care of you and the baby. And try to, I don't know the word worry, but everyone worries, but try not to worry, I guess. And you had no one. It was on you to kind of update them. And were they receptive to that? Did they like rush to the
They
hospital?
did not text me back. The entire time I was in labor, I didn't get any text back. Um, when it was time to push, the OB said, "Where are they? What are we doing with baby afterwards? Because I know you don't want him here. Where are they?" And I said, "I don't know. I'm not getting a text back." And she actually got really upset and she said, "You know what? That's enough. You've done your job. You let them know. If they want to come get their baby, he'll be in the nursery.
Wow.
And whenever they feel like coming or responding, that's on them." She
Wow.
said, "It's time to focus on you because we have a very big situation on our hands."
It breaks my heart. Do you know, was there any communication like at the hospital, like after
So
born?
once I got wheeled to the recovery room, a nurse came in. And now, mind you, I had to put my room on lockdown. I said no contacts because I didn't want them trying to come into my room.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want them creating a scene. So the only person allowed in my room was my husband, and he had to say his password every time.
Gotcha.
Um, a nurse came in and she handed me a post-it note, and she was very hesitant to give it to me. And she handed it to me, and it just said, "Thank you." And that was it.
And that was from the intended parents, I'm assuming.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And the whole time, the agency never came to see me. Um, they called here and there, but again, I wasn't really their issue anymore. They got their money. So everything is kind of my problem at that point.
Have you had any complications like this with the pregnancies that were your own?
Never. Never. You actually can't be a surrogate if you have any birth complications or, gestational diabetes or hypertension, any kind of unexplained bleeding, you won't get medically qualified.
I see. And what about your first surrogacy experience?
Never.
No
No.
complications.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then you are at the hospital recovering. Did you get to go home on a normal postpartum course? Let's shift our gears now to your postpartum recovery.
So I did not get to go home on a regular postpartum plan because I was actually very anemic by the time I got to delivery. And so they needed to give me enough iron infusions to get me back to a healthy level.
I see. And then when you got home, did you recover fairly well? I mean, we say 6 weeks is always kind of a joke, I think, anyway. But we say, 6 weeks and your recovery is coming to a close. What about you?
Absolutely not. I actually bled for a total of 19 weeks after delivery.
Did your
And
health insurance policy still carry? Like, were you able to see a doctor? Did you?
it was supposed to still carry, but the OB I was at kept telling me it was normal, that some women just bleed for up to 20 weeks.
Mhm. But you'd already been bleeding from like what? Remind me, like 30 weeks, 30.
32 weeks.
Yeah. So you've, yeah,
Yeah, and it wasn't just bleeding, we're talking huge blood clots, the kind that they tell you, "If you're passing these, you need to come
right.
to the hospital immediately."
The kind the nurses are concerned with. Like,
Yes.
if you're soaking a pad in an hour, that's not good. Let us know. Come to, yeah. Okay. So that's the kind of bleeding you're having. Were you able to finally get help? What was,
I begged the OB, I was turned away every time. Again, I think this goes back to a surrogacy tolerant policy does not mean surrogacy friendly. In their eyes, it felt like, "Look, you delivered, you're not our issue anymore." And it also goes to because I am not their long-term patient. They know that once I deliver, this policy is done and they'll probably never see me again.
hmm.
Um, and so I was begging for permission to go see an out-of-network OB, begging, and was denied every time until the issue of the birth certificate came up. The parents decided halfway through my pregnancy that after the baby was born, they were going to move to Spain. And because the father is a Spanish citizen, the baby qualifies for dual citizenship. However, the Spanish embassy, Spain does not,
It's illegal to do surrogacy
yeah,
in
yeah,
Spain. Yeah.
exactly. They don't
I think that's what
acknowledge
you were getting
it.
at.
Yeah, sorry, I blanked out.
Don't be
Um,
sorry.
And so what the Spanish embassy needed was my original birth certificate
Your
and
birth certificate.
my birth certificate. And I said, absolutely not. That wasn't in the contract in the beginning. I know this is a normal thing to do when the IPs are international, especially from countries that don't acknowledge surrogacy. Um, but when we went into this contract, this wasn't even a conversation that we had.
Right.
And so their lawyer came up with, well, we'll give you money for a second opinion if you hand over your birth certificate immediately.
Oh, so we'll care about your health if you give us what we want.
Exactly. Exactly.
Wow. I'm kind of speechless. I don't know what to say. That's really um exploitive.
It's extortion, is
Yeah.
what it felt like.
Yeah. Did you provide, I don't know why this is coming into my head right now, but did you provide breast milk for this family?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
I wanted nothing to do with it. And that actually led to another issue. Thank you for asking. The mom wanted donor milk, and the milk bank needed a form filled out that she couldn't produce milk, which is why she needed donor milk. They decided that that was my job. So the caseworker reached out and said, "Hey, the intended mother needs this form filled out to get milk for the baby. Either you do it or I do it." And I said, "I'm not doing anything for her, you know?" And so the caseworker, having access to my patient portal, logged on, pretended to be me, and sent the request for my OB to fill out that form for the intended mother. Now, because the intended mother's name was on the form, the OB flagged it as fraud. And I was actually referred to the hospital's customer care to be investigated for fraud.
Because someone else logged into your portal pretending to be you, trying to get this donor milk.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. It sounds like this OB was like no nonsense.
Yeah. She was, if I had to take a guess, she was not fond of the thought of surgery.
Yeah. I'm not fond of surrogacy either, but I can still treat people with compassion and care. But yeah, I'm sorry that that was your experience. So did all of this have any effect on, I mean, certainly I can imagine. So you're not pumping breast milk, you go home with empty arms, which is what you agreed to go home with, but then you have kind of all this health stuff going on. You have this journey I'll use your words there in quotes, that you're just unhappy with. How does this affect someone's mental health?
It actually destroyed me. Once the bleeding, I was in fight or flight from the very beginning. And so once the hyperemesis passed, once I delivered, once the bleeding finally stopped, it's almost like the world caved in on me. I had this moment of realization of, oh my God, what the hell just happened to me? I was dismissed. I was treated like garbage. I was talked to in such a disgusting way. Um, I was sent pictures of my house by the intended mother. I lived in a state of, is she watching me right now? Is she stalking me? I absolutely snapped and I had to check myself into a mental health facility because I stopped functioning.
Would you say like a postpartum depression type as well? Or
I don't know. I mean, it was a depression. I don't think it was because I didn't have the child. I think it was just,
so
I
much?
had kind of realized that in a way I was just trafficked. And everything that I had signed a contract for, it didn't even matter because nobody went by that contract. And because I was getting paid, then I was told to shut up about it.
Yeah.
That it didn't matter because this is what I signed up for.
What are some words that you would use to describe how, besides what you've already used, the surrogacy experience made you feel?
Used, discarded, actually felt very ashamed that I put my family through this. When I was disappearing into the hospitals, my youngest child, who was 5 at the time, kept running into the room every morning to check if I was still there. I felt horrible that I would do this to my family. Um, I felt like I was contributing to an industry that might not have the best interest of the surrogates, regardless of how they paint it to you and how they sell it to you. Um, I just felt so lost. And I was terrified to speak out because I know the heat that comes from this multi-billion-dollar industry when you try to stand up against it.
And from our correspondence, you're not the only one that feels this way. You've shared with me some other women who do. And I hope to share their stories as well. But you talked a little bit about how it impacted your children. Did it impact your marriage at all, or any other parts of your family that you want?
Absolutely. My husband, as much as he doesn't want to use the word, I think began to resent me because it was like, how could you care more about completing this people's family when it's costing you your life? And I don't think the 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 possibility of losing me became greater and greater as the pregnancy progressed, and I don't think he knew how to react except for anger and probably distancing himself from me so that if I did pass away, it wouldn't hurt as much.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, my marriage went through the ringer. And then to have this thought of, okay, when I deliver, it'll be over. And that wasn't the case. I am still dealing with medical bills and my mental health will forever be impacted by this. I'm on antidepressants, I'm on mood stabilizers, I go to therapy once a week. My children are in therapy. It just feels like I can't move on from that, and it's like I'm being crushed slowly.
And you talk about, the medical bills kind of piling up, therapy bills. I mean, I'm assuming now your insurance policy is probably over. So now this is all on you and your private insurance or what's provided to your family through your husband's work or whatever. So I don't think, and I want to kind of stress this point from other women I've talked to and just my understanding of the industry, like surrogacy is a whole body experience. First of all, when you have a baby in your stomach, it's a whole body experience. We talked about the flowery language earlier. It's renting your womb. It's, my or their bun, my oven. That doesn't exist. And I think that your story is a really good example of this, because as much as you wanted it to be this transaction of like, I will give them their baby, it has impacted your entire life. And now it still is, even though it's over, so to speak. And so, yeah, I guess I just really want to highlight that point that you make, that this is still impacting your family. And people say, oh, well, the intended parents or the agency will pay for any complications or they'll pay for your healthcare. To a point, right? To a point, or maybe they will, in your experience, you had to fight for it. You had to be your own advocate. So what would you want someone listening to this video thinking of maybe becoming a surrogate mother? What would you want them to know? What would you tell them?
I would want them to know that it's not just you going through this, it's your entire family. Your body is going to change forever, whether it's a good experience or a bad experience. And I would want them to know that they do not have access to their lawyer the entire time. So when
Mm.
things go wrong, it's out of your pocket to keep retaining that lawyer. You do not have a say in what medical um, help you can get, what those steps are. Everything in your life is now controlled by the parents. And because agencies are so terrified of looking bad, they will scare you into compliance. And you have to be ready to be nothing but a womb. And I don't think women are told the reality of that. You do not exist. We're going to tell you that you do and that we're grateful for you. But really, all we want is that baby. And that most contracts have actually a clause in them that if you were to get into any kind of accident, something happens to you, your family has to keep you on life support until that baby is ready to be delivered. So keep that in mind, that you might possibly be putting your family and children through the ringer, um, for the sake of, a few $1,000s. Um, and it's just ultimately, you can't put a price on it. You cannot put a price on being locked away from your children, on being denied IV fluids, on on almost dying. There's no amount of money, and even dying, even having that life insurance policy, I am irreplaceable. You are irreplaceable to the role that you play for your family. You are a mother before you are a surrogate. And I don't think these women really truly means um, what it would mean to die in the process.
I feel like you need an applause. That was beautiful. Like, you're right. You are invaluable as a person. There is no money that can cover that. What would you want? Because I often get to talk to lawmakers on behalf if we can't secure. We often try to have past surrogate mothers also speak to lawmakers. But let's say lawmakers are listening, or I'm going to present and talk to them. What do you want lawmakers to know? Because as you know, in the United States, every state is different. We have international surrogacy, as you're well aware. It's just like this patchwork of just whatever goes. And in California, it is kind of whatever goes.
Yeah.
So what would you want lawmakers to know specifically? Anything at all?
First and foremost, it should be up to the surrogate what health insurance policy she gets, you know, it should be her choice. This is it's her body. She's gonna have to deal with these people for 9 months. She should be comfortable with the level of care that she's receiving. Um, Number two, I need surrogacy agencies to stop telling surrogates that their compensation is not taxed. That is a complete lie, but of course they're going to tell you that because they want you to sign. I really need the government to step in and regulate these agencies. In the state of California, anyone can start a surrogacy agency. If I wanted to tomorrow, I could start recruiting surrogates and start charging $30,000 of match fees to pair you with, whoever. I need intended parents to undergo mandatory psych evaluations. If the surrogate has to do it, why aren't these people who are going to become parents? Why do they not have to do it? I also need that insurance policy, that life insurance policy to be regulated. Why is one surrogate's life worth 150 and then another one's worth 500? How do you ultimately get to decide what a human being is worth?
You bring up
Yeah.
great points. We stand at the CBC, which is a different opinion of yours, is that really you can't regulate it, right? You can't regulate the cost of a human life, and we think that there should be an end to this. Recently, there's been a press release for a provisional agreement that in the European Parliament that the exploitation of surrogacy is the same as trafficking, and that just came out this week. And I think it's pertinent to this call because that's the way that you felt, and here we're seeing this out of Europe. So Gloria, I want to thank you so much for coming and talking to me. We will be in contact. Is there anything else that you'd like to add or say that I didn't ask you before we end this interview?
No, I want to thank you for letting me really stand up against this industry. And you have to remember it's not helping build families. You are a part of a multi-billion-dollar industry that goes beyond surrogates. It goes beyond agencies. We're talking the IVF clinics. Um, so I completely agree when you say it is human trafficking because you're you're renting a womb. You're handing a human being to other human beings to do whatever they want with, to treat however they want. And when you exchange money for a human being, what is that
Yeah,
classified as?
right. The bottom line, right?
Exactly.
Well, again, thank you. Thank you for your honesty, your just being willing to open up this such an important and very personal subject with me. And yeah, I hope and wish for you healing, and I hope you find the healing that you and your family need so that you can move on and enjoy those two little boys, those precious kids.
Thank you so much, Callie, to you and your organization.
Of
And
course.
yes, we will be in touch for sure.
All right. Thank you. And for all our listeners, thank you so much.